because roughly 2 days after they were seized in Caracas during a massive U.S. military raid, deposed Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro and his wife Celia Flores made their first appearance yesterday in New York court. The two pleaded not guilty to federal charges related to drugs and weapons and will be held without bail until their next court date in mid-March.
Donald Trump is absolutely stunned right now as his entire Venezuela operation is just collapsing, like completely imploded. And not because of Democrats, not because of the media, not because of some deep state conspiracy, but because his own star witness just flipped on him, yeah. The guy who was supposed to be the key to putting Maduro away for life just admitted the whole thing was a setup. Hugo Carvajal, Venezuela's top spy master, the guy running intelligence for Maduro's regime, just got up in federal court and said, yeah, the CIA told me what to say, the evidence was fabricated, the cocaine manifests were inflated, the whole cartel narrative was scripted to justify military strikes, and oh yeah, the real goal wasn't stopping drugs, it was seizing oil. This happened in an emergency hearing in the Southern District of New York. The guy who was supposed to be the prosecution's ace in the hole just torched the entire case. And here's what makes this absolutely devastating. This isn't coming from some liberal pundit or resistance Twitter account. This is coming from Trump's own cooperating witness, the guy the DOJ was relying on to make their case. And now he's sitting there saying the whole operation was a political hit job designed to grab Venezuelan oil fields while pretending it was about fighting drug trafficking. But real quick, before we get into this, let's be honest. You can't really trust mainstream media anymore. That's why we built John Brown's show, to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, please subscribe, because you might think you are but aren't. Your subscription actually matters here. All right, let's get into what actually happened and why this is potentially war crimes territory. Hugo Carvajal wasn't just some random Venezuelan official. He ran military intelligence under Hugo Chavez and then under Maduro. We're talking about one of the most powerful figures in the Venezuelan government. He knew where all the bodies were buried, literally and figuratively. He was connected to everything: the military, the intelligence services, the alleged drug operations, all of it. When he got arrested, the DOJ was celebrating. They had their guy, the insider who could connect all the dots and prove that the Venezuelan government was basically a criminal enterprise masquerading as a country. Share this video with everyone you know, because they charged him with narco-terrorism, with being part of something called the Cartel de los Soles, Cartel of the Suns, named after the star insignia that Venezuelan military officers wear. The whole theory was that high-ranking military officials were using their positions to facilitate drug trafficking through Venezuela, and Carvajal was looking at life in prison. Multiple life sentences, probably. So he did what a lot of people in that position do. He cut a deal. He agreed to cooperate. He agreed to testify against Maduro. And in exchange, the DOJ sealed his plea agreement and didn't sentence him yet. They kept him on ice, waiting to use him as their star witness when Maduro's trial started. This is actually pretty common in big organized crime cases. You flip somebody high up in the organization. You keep them cooperating by dangling the possibility of a reduced sentence. And then you use their testimony to take down the whole network. It's the same playbook they used with Noriega back in the 90s during the Panama situation. Get the insider, use them to justify military action, and then prosecute the leader you just overthrew. Except here's where it gets messy, because Carvajal just admitted that his cooperation wasn't exactly voluntary or accurate. Make sure you're subscribed to John Brown Show, because according to his testimony, and these are his words, he said, "No direct Maduro orders. CIA scripted my intel to greenlight strikes. Oil was endgame." Let that sink in for a second. The guy who was supposed to prove Maduro was running a cartel is now saying the evidence was fabricated, that the CIA told him what to say, that there were no direct orders from Maduro connecting him to drug operations, and that the whole point of inflating the intelligence was to create a justification for military strikes. Not to stop drugs, but to seize oil. And he's getting specific. He's talking about how they created fake cocaine manifests, how they inflated shipment numbers, how they manufactured connections that didn't exist. He's describing a process where CIA handlers would feed him information and tell him how to present it, to make it sound like Maduro was personally overseeing massive drug trafficking operations. when in reality, according to Carvajal, the connection was way more tenuous than what he testified to in his sealed plea agreement. But it gets worse because Carvajal isn't just talking about the intelligence being cooked, he's also spilling details about the actual military operation. And this is stuff that was supposed to be classified. He's talking about how over 150 US aircraft were involved, F-35 stealth fighters, B-1 bombers. He's describing how they created a no-fly zone, how they cleared Venezuelan air defenses, how one helicopter got hit, but there were 0 US casualties. He's laying out the entire operation. And in the process, he's making it crystal clear that this wasn't some quick extraction mission. This was a full-scale military invasion. Share this with everyone and he's directly implicating Rubio and Hegseth. According to his testimony, they bypassed normal extradition procedures. See, normally if you want to arrest a foreign leader on criminal charges, you go through diplomatic channels. You file extradition requests, you work through international law. It's slow and it's bureaucratic, but it's the legal way to do things. But according to Carvajal, Rubio and Hegseth decided that was too slow. They wanted regime change. They wanted to topple Maduro, and they wanted to secure Venezuelan oil fields. So they used inflated drug intelligence as a pretext to launch a military operation instead. This is where things get really serious. Because if Carvajal is telling the truth now, and given that he's asking for witness protection because he's getting death threats, it seems like he probably is, then Trump's entire justification for the Venezuela operation was based on false intelligence. Intelligence that was deliberately fabricated to create a legal pretext for what was essentially an act of war. 27 civilians died in those strikes. 27. And now we're finding out the intelligence used to authorize them was fabricated. That's not a small thing. That's not something you can just spin away with a Truth Social post and some Fox News appearances. This is serious. This is the kind of thing that gets referred to the International Criminal Court. This is the kind of thing that tears apart presidencies. He's at Mar-a-Lago watching this unfold on Fox News, and he's calling Carvajal a traitor. He's saying the Democrats bought him off. He's insisting we're still running Venezuela. He went on Fox News and said traitor Carvajal bought by Dems, we're still running Venezuela. Which, okay, but that doesn't actually address the substance of what Carvajal said. That's just Trump doing what Trump does, attacking the messenger instead of dealing with the message. But here's the thing that makes this even more devastating for Trump. This testimony didn't happen in a vacuum. This came just 2 days after Judge Hellerstein dismissed a bunch of related charges because he ruled the raid itself was illegal. So you've got a federal judge saying the operation violated international law. And now you've got the star witness saying the intelligence justifying it was fake. That's a 1-2 punch that's really hard to recover from. And the political implications, they're massive. You've got Republicans who were already getting uncomfortable with Trump's Venezuela adventure, now openly distancing themselves. Marjorie Taylor Greene and Rand Paul are both citing this as evidence of what they're calling a perjury cover-up. And get this, 31 House Republicans have now announced they're not seeking re-election. 31, that's not normal attrition. That's people getting off a sinking ship. Share this video with everyone you know because Democrats obviously are having a field day with this. They're already talking about adding this to their impeachment articles. You've got war crimes referrals being prepared for the International Criminal Court. You've got calls for special prosecutors. The whole thing is spiraling, and economically, oil prices have surged 25%. Because while Trump's been saying we're running Venezuela, the reality on the ground is chaos. Venezuelan oil production has basically stopped. International companies won't do business there because they don't know who's actually in charge. And global markets are responding by driving up prices, which means Americans are paying more at the pump because of Trump's adventure. The parallel to Panama in 1990 is pretty striking here. Back then, the US invaded Panama to arrest Noriega on drug charges. But everyone knew the real reason was about controlling the canal and removing a leader who'd become inconvenient. The drug charges were just the justification, and that operation, while it succeeded in the sense that they got Noriega, was internationally condemned, and it set precedents that a lot of legal scholars thought were dangerous. This feels like a repeat of that playbook, except this time the star witness is admitting it was all fabricated before the case even gets to trial. Now let me break this down into the key points that actually matter here. Point 1, this completely undermines Trump's legal justification for the Venezuela operation. The whole basis for launching a military strike into a sovereign nation was that Maduro was running a criminal enterprise, that he was personally involved in narco-terrorism, that Venezuela had become a narco state under his leadership. And the evidence for all of that, at least the most important evidence, was supposed to come from Hugo Carvajal, a guy who was literally inside the Venezuelan government at the highest levels and could testify to what was really happening. Except now Carvajal is saying that testimony was fake, that the CIA scripted his intel, that there were no direct orders from Maduro, that the whole cartel narrative was exaggerated to justify regime change. So what does that leave? It leaves a military operation that was launched based on fabricated intelligence for the purpose of what? Seizing oil, achieving regime change. Those aren't legal justifications under international law. Those are exactly the kind of things that get referred to the International Criminal Court as potential war crimes. Point 2, the political fallout is going to be enormous, and it's already starting. You can see it in the Republican response. 31 House Republicans not seeking re-election is unprecedented for a party that controls the House. That doesn't happen unless people are seeing something that really scares them. And what they're seeing is a president who launched an illegal military operation based on false intelligence and is now watching his legal defense collapse in real time. Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's not exactly known for breaking with Trump, is calling this a perjury cover-up. Rand Paul is demanding investigations. Share this with everyone because you've got mainstream Republicans who supported the operation, initially now very quietly trying to create distance. Because they can see where this is heading, they can see the impeachment articles being drafted, they can see the political ads that are going to run in the midterms about Republicans who supported an illegal war based on fake intelligence. And Democrats, they're unified on this in a way they haven't been unified on anything in years. Because this isn't about policy differences or political strategy. This is about fundamental questions of whether a president can launch military operations based on fabricated intelligence. That's not a partisan question, that's a constitutional question. Point 3, this changes the entire narrative around Trump's second term. Up until now, Trump's defenders could argue that, yeah, maybe some of his actions were aggressive or unconventional, but they were legal and they were justified by legitimate national security concerns. The Venezuela operation was supposed to be an example of Trump being tough on drug cartels and defending American interests. But if the intelligence was fabricated, if the real goal was seizing oil and achieving regime change, then it's not about being tough or defending interests. It's about lying to justify military action. And that's a Nixon-level scandal. That's a Gulf of Tonkin-level scandal. That's the kind of thing that fundamentally damages a presidency in ways that are really hard to recover from. Here's what makes it even worse. Trump's own response is making things worse. Instead of trying to get ahead of this, instead of ordering a transparent investigation into what intelligence was used and how he's attacking Carvajal, he's calling him a traitor. He's claiming without evidence that Democrats bought him off. But that doesn't work when the guy is testifying under oath in federal court while asking for witness protection because he's getting death threats. That's not the profile of somebody who's been bought off. That's the profile of somebody who's legitimately terrified of what he just revealed. Point 4, and this is maybe the most important one, this is going to poison the midterm elections in ways Republicans aren't fully grasping yet. Because Democrats now have a simple message. Republicans supported an illegal war based on fake intelligence, and when they found out it was fake, they tried to cover it up. That's a devastating attack line. It writes itself. And it's backed up by court testimony and federal judges ruling the operation was illegal. You're going to see ads in every competitive district showing Trump bragging about running Venezuela. Cut to Carvajal testifying the intelligence was fabricated. Cut to Republicans who supported the operation. And then a simple question. Did they know it was fake or did they just not care? Either answer is terrible for Republicans trying to hold their seats. Share this video with everyone you know because an oil prices being up 25%, that makes it personal for voters. Now they're paying more at the pump and they can draw a direct line from Trump's Venezuela operation to their increased costs. That's political kryptonite. Voters will forgive a lot of things, but making them pay more for gas because of a potentially illegal military adventure, that's really hard to spin. The International Criminal Court referrals are also a huge deal. Now, the US doesn't recognize the ICC's jurisdiction over US citizens, but the fact that war crimes referrals are being prepared, the fact that international legal scholars are saying this operation violated the Geneva Conventions, that's going to make it really hard for Trump to travel internationally. It's going to make it really hard for the US to claim moral authority on international law issues, and it's going to be a propaganda gift to America's adversaries for years. So, where does this go from here? Well, Carvajal is now in witness protection. He's cooperating with investigators who are looking into how the intelligence got fabricated and who knew what when. You're probably going to see more testimony, more details coming out about the planning of the operation, more evidence about whether the oil seizure was always the goal. You're definitely going to see impeachment proceedings accelerate. Democrats were already talking about impeaching Trump over various issues, but this gives them something concrete, something with court testimony and judicial rulings backing it up, something that even some Republicans might have trouble defending. And you're going to see a lot of Republicans trying to figure out how to position themselves. Do they stick with Trump and hope this blows over? Do they distance themselves and risk his wrath? Do they try to have it both ways by saying they supported the operation based on the intelligence they had at the time, but now have concerns? None of those are good options, which is why 31 of them have already decided to just retire rather than deal with it. The bottom line here, Trump's Venezuela operation, which was supposed to be this demonstration of American strength and resolve, has turned into potentially the biggest scandal of his presidency. His own star witness has admitted the intelligence was fabricated. A federal judge has ruled the operation was illegal, and the political and legal consequences are just starting to unfold. This isn't going away. This is going to define the rest of Trump's term and probably the next election cycle too. The timing of this is absolutely brutal. This testimony happened just 2 days after Judge Hellerstein dismissed charges. So you've got a federal judge saying the operation violated international law, and now you've got the star witness saying the intelligence justifying it was fake. It's like watching a legal strategy implode in real time, and the details Carvajal is spilling, they're devastating. He's talking about how he was coached by CIA handlers to inflate his testimony, how there were no direct orders from Maduro linking him to drug operations, how the whole Cartel de los Soles narrative was exaggerated to create a justification for regime change. He's describing fake cocaine manifests and bribed officials and manipulated intelligence reports, and he's directly implicating Rubio and Hegseth, saying they bypassed normal extradition procedures because the goal was never about bringing criminals to justice. It was about toppling a government and grabbing resources. This is serious. This is the kind of thing that gets referred to the International Criminal Court. This is the kind of thing that tears apart presidencies. This story continues. Stay tuned.